So like I was saying, if you believe that everything happens according to God's plan and that God wills everything that happens, it cannot be true. Genesis chapter 1 verses 27 through 28 says this: God created humankind in His image. In the image of God He created them, male and female He created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. God has given human beings dominion over this planet. That is, God has placed the human race in charge of God's planet, making us responsible for what happens here. We are given the responsibility to act on God's behalf, managing, tending, and ruling over the planet. Now, thank goodness we're not left completely to our own devices to rule over this planet. God set in motion certain natural laws that govern our planet that are predictable. And God gave humans intellect, He gave them a soul, and He gave a conscience in order to help us to know right from wrong. And later, God gave the human race the law and then the prophets. And when that was not enough, God sent His own Son, Jesus Christ. He came to show us and to teach us God's will for the human race. Love God and love your neighbor. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yes, love even your enemies. Forgive, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger. That greatness is found in serving. Jesus' death on the cross demonstrates what sacrificial love looks like. You may not realize it, but God's primary way of working in the world is through people. When God wants something done in the world, He calls people to do it. When the poor need to be fed, God doesn't rain down manna from heaven. God sends people. When the sick are going to be cared for, God sends people. I take this moment to thank all those healthcare professionals out there, those first responders who are taking care of people at this time, many of them doing God's work. When justice is going to be sought, God sends people to fight for it. And when others are discouraged and in need of love, God sends people to offer encouragement and to administer care. This is how God has always worked. When God wanted the Israelites set free, God sent Moses. When God wanted to comfort the Jews in exile, God prompted Jeremiah to prophesy. When Jesus wanted the gospel to go to the ends of the earth, He sent the apostles. God's primary way of working in the world is through people who are empowered and being led by God's power and God's Spirit. This pandemic that we are facing now is bringing about uncertain times in our country's history. It will most likely bring about both good and bad, isolation and community. Both our minds and our souls are tempted toward anxiety and fear, which causes us to fixate on toilet paper and hand sanitizer as though they could actually govern our destiny. This is a time when we as God's people, led and empowered by His Spirit, need to step forward with compassion and a peace that can only be found in the presence of God. You know, as I listen to the media, as I watch the news feeds, as I talk to people who seem to reject God, I am struck with one thought. Rejecting God does not change the situation. It only removes the greatest source of hope, the greatest source of help, the greatest source of comfort and strength that we have. So let me be clear. Christianity does not promise that we will never suffer, but it does promise that suffering will never have the final word. The Israelites were set free. David found deliverance from his affliction, and on the third day, Jesus Christ rose from the dead. God does not bring unjust suffering on His children, but God will, however, force such things to serve His purposes. God will walk with us through the fires, through the floodwaters, and through this virus. In Romans chapter 8, verse 18, the writer says this, the present suffering is nothing compared to the coming glory that is going to be revealed in us. Now let us be honest with one another this evening. We all worry about something. We all have things we fear. Fear is a powerful emotion. It can shape our perspective in ways that we don't even fully understand. Honestly, sometimes we fear things that will never happen, but real or imagined, fear has power. There are other times when our fear actually is well placed. People have good reason to be afraid. Pandemics, economic crisis, we will never be able to completely eliminate fear from our lives, but we do need to learn to control it and even learn from fear and press through our fears. 140 times in the Bible, the words, "don't be afraid," or their equivalent appear. They remind us that ordinary men and women in the Old and New Testament struggled with fear. First century Christians struggled with fear. But it also shows us that faith can be pivotal in overcoming fear and finding peace in uncertain times. I would like to leave with you this evening one of my favorite verses, John chapter 14, verse 27, and I'll be reading it out of the New Living Translation. Jesus is about to ascend back to heaven, and this is what he says. I am leaving with you a gift, peace of mind and peace of heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled and don't be afraid. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.